Your quads do not want you to just carry on blindly adding weight to your hack squat. It took me 4 years to learn this and it has cost me so much leg growth. So I've always wanted to get as jacked as possible, right? I grew up naturally skinnier, especially my legs. They were built like a HB pencil and I was committed to getting as jacked as I possibly could. I was obsessed with it. I wanted to be a bodybuilder. People were saying that I should have been a long distance runner because of my build, but I wanted to get jacked. That was my life goal. It's what mattered more than anything. I tried to sneak into the local gym, got kicked out because I wasn't old enough, and so I convinced my dad to turn our attic into a home gym. So we ended up spending over £1,300 on cast iron plates, power racks, barbells, multi-gyms off Facebook Marketplace, and a hack squat. I convinced my dad to buy a hack squat because for the first year training up there, I didn't really have the hack squat. I was doing box squats, I was doing barbell squats, and it just didn't even touch my quads. Like nothing had happened with my legs at all, zero. And I was convinced, I was absolutely convinced that it was the equipment because I was watching these guys on Snapchat, these huge bodybuilders training at like elite gyms, and they had these perfect hack squat machines. And I was thinking, if I had that machine, if I could just go into a machine and just do the reps, and that's all that mattered, I would grow. I could grow. That is what I'm missing, that right there. And I was like, okay, it's this. So during the lockdowns in 2020, I convinced my dad to go and pick up a hack squat from Facebook Marketplace with me. So we had to use our hour of exercise to cross the border, pick up a hack squat and come back. And I put it all together, built it up in a tiny little room in my attic, and the hack squat didn't actually fit through the door, so I had to build it in this room. But I was so gassed to have it because it meant that, you know, the nearest hack squat in a gym to where I lived was around an hour and a half drive away, but now I had one in my top room and I was going to rinse it until my legs got huge. That is what I decided. And I think it all stemmed because I heard somebody on social media, a big bodybuilder, say, if you can hack squat 2 times your body weight, you will have huge legs. And I was like, that's it. That's it. Problem solved. That's it. That's what I need to do. I just need to buy a hack squat, put on 160 kilos, which was double my body weight at the time, and I will have huge legs. Simple. So the day after I got this hack squat built up, I put on 80 kilos and I was like, right, let's see how this feels. So I had a 20, a 15 and a 5 per side because that's how my cast iron plates worked. I didn't have two 20s. I had like a 15, a 10, a 5, a 2.5, 1.25. So, you know, the weight stack looked like this either side, which was quite funny. But the first day, jumped on 80 kilos. I was like, right, here we go. We're going to work this up to 100, 160, but let's start with 80, see how this feels. This is body weight. And it was quite clunky. Like the hack squat obviously wasn't the best hack squat on planet Earth, but I did 10 reps and I was like, yeah, okay, I can do that, but I'm not really feeling it in my quads. Like my knees are hurting a little bit on the way up. I'm not really sure where my feet need to be, but all I need to focus on is 160 kilos for 10 reps. When I've done that, I'll have huge legs. And I just had this goal in my head. It was like, we just have to add weight each week. We just need to carry on picking this up. And when I can do 160 for 10 reps, regardless of how it feels, regardless of, you know, what hurts, I will have huge legs. I had this imprinted in my brain. So a week later, when it was back on leg day, I was like, right, this time 90 kilos. I put 90 kilos on. Same thing again, I did my reps and my form was like 10 out of 10. I was getting full range of motion reps. I was, you know, pretty controlled on the way down. I was exploding up, getting a full range of motion. I was bottoming it out at the bottom. I was like, okay, my form's great. I'm going to keep my form the same and just carry on working it up. But every single time I finished a set on that hack squat, I was like, have my quads actually done the work there? I had this sneaky feeling. It was like, are my quads the thing that is actually driving that rep? Are they the thing that's stopping me at the end of the set? Or is it a little bit of knee pain? Is it a little bit of my lower back cramping? Like, is it other things that are taking over? Or is it my quads? And every single time it was like, it wasn't my quads getting hit properly, but I didn't care because all I was focused on was the 160 for 10 reps. That's all I needed to focus on. So a week later, I came back, 100 kilos on there. And by this point, I was having to use knee wraps because my knees were like cracking at the bottom. They weren't happy. There was pain as soon as I got on the machine from the week before where my knees remembered how it felt. And as soon as I got above 120 kilos, that was 134.5 kilos was the maximum in cast iron plates I had in my attic. As soon as I was doing 134.5, I was having to BFR band my quads. So I was having to get an elastic band, wrap the top of my quad, tie it so that the blood would flow into my quad, but it couldn't get out, just so that I could protect my knees and flood my quad with blood and give it a crazy pump so that the knee pain wouldn't make me stop. Like, I had knee wraps on, I had BFR bands on, And I was just focused on, look, I don't care what I have to do. All I need to do is get to 160 for 10 reps with perfect form. If I do that, I will have big legs. And it was imprinted in my brain, right? I'd heard it once and I was like, this is my goal. I'm going to do that. So 134.5, the maximum amount I could do with weight plates. I did that for 10 reps and my knees felt like absolute shit. Quads were starting to feel it a little bit on the last rep or so, right? But apart from that, they felt nothing. After the set, they weren't pumped. The next day, they didn't hurt. My knees just hurt. But I did 134.5 for 10 reps, done. A week later, I figured out a way of adding more weight. I had a punching bag, like a boxing bag that weighed 30 kilos, and I put that on my back, took some of the weight off, and I had like 140. Did the same thing next week. And I carried on doing this for around about 6 months. And then 6 months later, I remember the day I was like, holy shit, today is the day. Today is the day I'm getting that 164.5 kilos for 10 reps. The week before I'd done 155, I'd got my 10 reps and I was like, this is the week. This is the week where I get that set for 10 reps. I've been adding weight, progressively overloading for the last 6 months perfectly on this machine. It's go time. It is go time. So I did a warm up on 100 and I was like, my knees feel like shit, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not feeling this in my quads. It doesn't matter. I just got to get 160 for 10. Everybody was telling me progressive overload is what matters. Adding more weight, adding more reps. If you do that, you will grow and you will grow as quickly as possible. This is all you need to focus on, just progression. So I put this punching bag on my back. I had 134.5 kilos on plates. They were like sloping like this because it went from a 20 kilo plate the whole way to a 1.25. I lifted off, unracked the machine, flicked the little handles by my sides, went down. First 5 reps, easy peasy, like easy peasy. They were absolutely flying. I was getting full range of motion, bottoming out at the bottom, coming up. Again, I wasn't feeling my quads, but even though I was BFR banding them, even though I had knee wraps on, my quads just didn't really feel like they were getting hit at all. But it was hard. Like the reps were slowing down. It was hard, but it just wasn't my quads doing the work. 6th, 7th, 8th rep started to slow down. The 9th rep was so slow and I hit a sticking point halfway up where it was like, is this rep gonna move? I forced my way through because I was so adamant in my head on getting this 10th rep. And on the 10th rep, I remember I went down to the bottom, pressed halfway up, got about 2 centimeters off and it really did not want to move. And then I remember just letting out like this crazy scream that was just like, and we had a Velux window. So like a window that opens inwards in the attic because it was a slanted roof and the window was completely open. And I remember shouting for like 10 seconds, like, oh, getting this up. I got the rep up. I looked out the window and there's a park next to our house. I looked out at the park and all the kids in the park were literally stood there going, even though they were outside the building, they were all looking up in my direction going, they thought someone had just been murdered. But I let out this shout, I did the rep, locked the weight off and I was like, oh my fucking God, I have done it. I have done it. I lay on the floor, my lower back was pumped to shit. And I reached down and I flicked off the Velcro on the elastic bands because they were like BFR bands. I flicked off the Velcro and the blood started dissipating, or blood started going back or around my body. And that tension was released. I looked down at my quads and it happened in like, boom, 1 second I had this realization. I was lying on the wooden laminate floors in that attic and I flicked off the bands. I undid my knee wraps and I looked down at my quads from that angle. And even though they had a crazy pump, not from the exercise, but from just the BFR banding, I looked down at them and went, you've barely grown. They have barely grown. Like they looked exactly the same as they did 6 months ago. Even though I was lifting an extra 80 kilos, I was doing 2 times my body weight. I was doing perfect full range of motion reps. I was controlling the eccentric. They looked exactly the same. And I just looked at them and I went, at this point, like, I was starting to question my genetics. I was like, okay, it works for other people, not gonna work for me. Like, I've done everything to the T. I have rinsed this. My diet has been on point. I've hit my protein every single day. I'm sleeping for 8 hours a night. I've come up here using this hack squat 1 to 2 times per week, progressively overloading every single fucking week, and my quads look exactly the same. It felt like I had been lied to. It felt like everyone I was talking to, every coach that I was messaging, everybody I was asking for advice from was just like, yeah, you just need to lift heavier. You just need to add a couple of reps. I had done that religiously for 6 months, gone from 80 kilos to 160. I looked down at my quads and I was like, I'm going to be stuck with these looking like this forever. That's it. You're done. And I looked down and I looked at my quads and thought they have probably grown like a minuscule amount. How much more weight am I going to have to add? How many more weird techniques like BFR banding, like knee wraps, how many weird things like this am I going to have to implement to actually grow that next bit of muscle? Am I just going to have to carry on endlessly throwing on more weight, doing more sets, scraping for stimulus wherever I can because I'm just so focused on adding weight and reps? Like all I cared about was just getting an extra rep compared to last week. Like I wasn't thinking about the stimulus, how it felt, how much my quads were actually getting out of it and whether they were the limiting factor or not. I was just thinking more weight, perfect form, more reps. If I do that, I'll grow. And that was my mentality for 6 months. I looked down and they looked exactly the same. It just hadn't worked. And that's where I kind of had an epiphany moment when I was like, I was currently optimizing for weight. I was optimizing for more weight and I'll build more muscle. I just need to add more weight. But when I was doing that, I would always, and if I carried on with this mindset of just trying to get more weight on the bar, trying to do reps with a heavier weight, trying to get more reps, I would always be scraping for stimulus, right? I would always be waiting for that 8th or 9th rep until it starts to feel a little bit in my quads and I can feel a bit of a stretch. And then it's shifted back to my knees. And then that last rep feels like shit, my form has changed and that's it. I just had like a rep and a half where it felt decent. And I would always be scraping for that moment. I would always be trying to do more sets so that I could have another few reps like that where it felt really good and I could feel it in my quads, and the next day they got sore and I got a pump in my quads and it was actually using my quads. I would always be scraping for 1 or 2 moments like that if I carried on optimizing for weight. And I remember lying on the floor like with my quads still in pain and they'd gone red because the BFR bands flooded blood to that area. They'd gone red. I unflicked them and I looked down and I went, I wonder if what if I optimized this exercise for stimulus instead? What if I just forgot about the weight and just opted for stimulus and just optimize this whole exercise for the sensation, the feeling, the disruption the day after, the pump during, the stretch sensation? What if I just really focused on that and forgot about the weight? What would that do? And I thought this to myself, and this was about 2 years into my lifting, right? I've been lifting consistently for 2 years total at this point. And every single other person on planet Earth had just been saying, soreness doesn't matter, stimulus doesn't matter, you just need to lift heavier and add more reps. And so I listened to them and I ignored myself. I just completely ignored myself. I was like, Ollie, that's stupid, bro, shut up, get back to lifting heavier. And so that's what I did for another 2 years. So for 4 years at the start of my lifting journey, I was just focused on add more reps, add more weight. This is what matters. Forget about soreness. Forget about stretch sensation. Forget about DOMs the next day. Forget about pump during the exercise. I don't care how it feels, just add more weight. And that's what I did. For the next 2 years, I literally just tried to work my hack squat and I worked it the whole way up to 200 kilos. And I even competed last year as a bodybuilder, right? And on stage, the judges were like, bro, your conditioning was really good. Your upper body muscularity, it's okay, it's decent. Your legs just look like a 12-year-old child's. They didn't quite say that as harsh, but that was the general gist of it. And it was just like my legs were still lagging behind, right? But more than that, it was deeper than that. I knew for a fact that I could be growing muscle quicker. I don't know how. I was just looking at my physique in the mirror going, I could be growing faster than this. What am I missing? It felt like I was growing at such a slow pace and everyone was telling me, oh, this is just how slow muscle growth is. I was like, fuck that. No, it isn't. I can grow quicker than this. I know I can. I should be, but I'm missing something. But still, in my mind, I was like, I can't go against what everybody is saying. I can't go against every coach on Instagram that's just saying soreness doesn't matter. You just need to lift heavier and add more reps and do this weird thing where I was going to chase like stimulus, which is really hard to define. How was I, what the fuck was this? I needed to stick on track and just listen and trust the process. So I did it for another 2 years. And then I got to the 4-year mark and I just started getting so fucked off with it. And after last year, where the judges pretty much said I had chicken legs, I decided that was enough, right? If I was going to carry on down that path for the rest of my life, I would never grow muscle. I would never have grown muscle at the speed that I wanted to grow muscle. I would never have got as jacked as I wanted to. So I had to try something else. Like even if it didn't work, I just needed to try a different approach. And so I went back to that question that I asked myself 2 years before up in my attic on that hack squat when I finished that set of 164 kilos, 500 grams, 10 reps, lay on the floor. And I realized that I had kind of been lied to about just adding weight, adding reps, even with perfect form. I'd been lied to and I felt like I'd been lied to. And then a question popped into my head. Why don't we try and make this exercise as grim as possible for our quads? Why don't we try and chase the stimulus side of things? Why don't we just try and optimize the shit out of this exercise to make it as grim as we possibly can for that target muscle? What would happen if we did that? Instead of chasing load, instead of chasing load or reps, why don't we just chase this? What would happen if we chased this, stimulus, and then progressed afterwards? Why not put this at the top of the priority list? I wonder what would happen then. And so that's what I did. I started adjusting every single exercise I was doing on a weekly basis for stimulus. How can I make this as grim as possible for my quads? How can I make it so that my quads are the thing that's limiting this exercise? How can I make it so that my quads are getting stretched as much as they possibly can be and have the most tension put on them? And so on hack squats, I went from using 170 kilos down to 130 again. But this time I was pausing at the bottom to make it a little bit harder and so that I didn't have any momentum on the way back up, and I was discharging all of the elastic energy in my tendons and just using my quads on the way back up. And even though I was using 40 kilos less on the machine, my quads were feeling it more. I could actually feel the stretch coming into my quads. Then I went from 130 kilos down to 110. And this time, my feet, instead of just being in the middle of the platform, I started working them down to get more knee flexion, stretch my quads out even further. And then I went from 110 to 100, and I actually started letting my heels come up to get even more knee flexion and to make this exercise even harder at the bottom where my quads was the most stretched. And I started implementing all of these little things, just chasing that stimulus, chasing that sensation of my quads stretching out to shit, chasing that sensation of my quads being the thing that was limiting my set. And what started happening for my quads was actually mind-boggling. Up until this point, I was used to seeing my quads grow like so slowly. I was used to looking in the mirror every single night when I walked down past my bedroom in my house. There's a mirror on the wall, and I used to look at my quads and go, fuck's sakes, they look exactly the same as yesterday. Okay, nothing's happening. Like, even if I had a pump, I'd run downstairs, I'd look at it, and it's like, okay, they look exactly the same. When I started chasing stimulus, and when I started adjusting my exercises in these way, and I learned like this framework, my quads were growing weekly. After 4 years of seeing barely any growth, my quads started growing weekly. Okay, and in the last 10 months, I've literally put on 7 centimeters in my quads, which, by the way, you should not be able to do 4 years into your lifting journey. Like, it's unheard of to grow this quickly, this deep into a lifting journey. At the start, yeah, you can see some great newbie gains and things happen really quickly, but 4 years in is when this started happening for me. For the first 4 years of my lifting journey, my legs, honestly, barely changed. And then in 10 months, I added 7 centimeters. And they completely look different. Sure, they're still a weak point, but they have grown so quickly. And I've applied the same methodology of like, how do I make this as hard as possible? And this framework that I've put together for all of my muscle groups, my physique is completely transformed. Like, completely transformed in literally 10 months. Compared to 4 years before that, grafting away, adding just reps and weight blindly. 10 months, adopting this new mindset, I'm growing quicker now than I did in my first year of lifting. Honestly. And this is where the elastic band model started coming to me. Every single week I was adjusting my exercises, thinking, how do I make this harder? How do I use that target muscle a little bit more? How do I make this as grim as possible for that muscle and optimize for this stimulus here? And I came up with these 6 rules, but it all stemmed from this one concept, right? And the concept is like treating your muscle groups not just like a muscle and not really thinking about how they work, etc., but treating them like an elastic band. And I know this sounds batshit crazy, but stay with me. There you go. Evie has a bobble on the floor, so we'll use this. But I started thinking about all of my muscle groups as an elastic band that can either, contract and get smaller, and that's what you're doing when you're contracting a muscle, or you can stretch it out to its maximum, okay? And I started thinking about, right, my bicep is now an elastic band, my quad is now an elastic band. They're all just big elastic bands, and my job, when I went into the gym, my job was to stretch it to the point where it started having little micro tears. It started fraying. It's starting to get to the point where it's so tight, little strands and little fibers in this elastic band started ripping apart. And that one little shift creates all of these rules, all of these little things to think about that can transform your physique entirely, right? So I started thinking about, if I want to cause the most tears on this elastic band possible, do I want to do quick stretches that it can handle easily, or do I want to have slow stretches where I'm taking it to the maximum? Do I want to be pulling the hardest at the start or when it's the most stretched? And literally this analogy will guide you to so many things in the gym that will help you grow so much more muscle. It helped me transform my quads in 10 months when I hadn't seen gains for 4 years before that. It's helped me transform hundreds of my clients' physiques by just giving them this and putting this into their training, like going, right, you need to implement this here, you need to change this, you need to make this more length and biased, you need to adjust your range of motion on this, you need to make this harder at this point, you need to change this exercise to hit it the most at the bottom, like all from this one concept, treating your muscles like one big fuck off elastic band and just thinking to yourself, how can I create the most little micro tears in it? How can I make this elastic band start fraying at the bottom? And it's all about chasing stimulus and chasing that tension. As soon as you do that, your whole training will change. And you'll go from somebody who has started questioning their genetics, who has started thinking, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to carry on down this route because, I've been training hard, I've been turning up consistently for the last 12 months, I'm progressively overloading, I'm tracking my reps, I'm lifting heavier, and I'm just not seeing the growth that I want, to literally fucking transforming in less than 12 months. I've seen it again and again and again with my clients, and I've seen it with myself as well. And there's 6 golden rules that I came up with the elastic band model, and if you apply those to your training, you get all of the benefits. And you will literally go from lifting heavier and heavier and heavier every single week to lifting the same weight or less weight with the same number of sets, with the same number of sessions, and growing so much more muscle. Like the same effort you're putting in right now, but building 2 times, I've even seen like 3 times the amount of muscle, just from this one concept. And honestly, over the last year, I've been experimenting with this concept because it is a bit batshit crazy. It is a bit weird. It is a bit counterintuitive to everything you're hearing on Instagram. And I wanted to be 100% sure that this is legit, that it works. And over the last year, I've been implementing it with my clients. I've been teaching it to my clients. I've been putting it into their training programs sneakily. And I've been using it on myself and I've seen what it can do. And now I'm ready to share it with everybody. Now I'm ready to go, guys, you need to get involved in this. And that's why on Thursday, I'm running a free masterclass. In this masterclass, I'm gonna break down exactly how I learned that technique, what I was thinking about at the time, what it has done for me and my clients, like the proof of what it has been doing for our physiques that I've never seen before, and then also break down the exact strategy in steps. So I'm going to run through rule number 1, rule number 2, rule number 3, not only what it is, but how to apply it to your training. All you have to do is rock up for 1 hour, learn these strategies once, and literally it could make you grow more muscle from every single set that you do for the rest of your life. So if you feel like you could be growing muscle so much quicker than you are right now, but you're not sure what you're missing, and you feel like you could carry on adding reps, you could carry on adding weight forever, and still not grow as quickly as you want, you need to be on this masterclass. You need to hear this strategy because it could change the way that you lift forever. We're going live at 4 p.m. on Thursday, UK time. The top link in this video will be to register for it for free. It's completely free. All you have to do is rock up and you're not going to get a recording of the webinar unless you're registered as well. So go and register yourself, learn this strategy, implement it to your training, grow more muscle in the next 10 months than you have in the last 5 years.